Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing good. In my today's session, I'm going to explain about how to switch between various versions of the .NET framework provided by Microsoft. Okay, there is a built-in utility which you can make use of in order to achieve this particular switch between various versions of the .NET framework. In occasionally or in very rare scenario, there is a requirement that you are required to point to a specific version of the .NET in order to run your enterprise grade application. Okay, or the application has been developed in the very older version of the .NET framework, which in order to run and get it up and running on your machine, you have to point to that version. Okay, in order to debug. So let's start with that without wasting much time. So what I'm going to do is I'm running this .NET hyphen hyphen list hyphen SDKS command in order to get what are the various .NET versions installed on my machine. So in my case, what I see is there are two versions. One is 7.0 and one another is 8.0. 8.0 is the latest version. Okay, guys. So now, if I want to run an application which is pointing to the previous version, which is 7.0, so what I need to do, that's what I'm going to take you through now. So I'm going to create a console-based application. Okay, so using the .NET command, that's .NET new console app type of application, and the name I'm giving as version based. Okay, so let me hit enter, and that should create a project for me. Excellent. This has created a project for me, a console-based .NET application. Now, if I check the .NET version against which it has created, if I see .NET hyphen hyphen version, okay, so basically which version of the .NET it used to create this application. Can you see by default, okay, the .NET framework or the .NET tool, basically the .NET command always uses the latest version of the .NET framework, okay, in order to create your .NET new and .NET run and all other .NET related commands basically. Now, if I come up with a scenario where I have application which has been developed in .NET version 6 or .NET version 5 or .NET version 7, some older version you would say, then how will I make a switch? Now, in order to do that, what you need to do is you need to introduce a file called global.json. Okay, so let's do that. Before that, let me switch to my newly created console application. So I have switched to my project which I had created, the console based application. Now assume that this particular application was developed in .NET version 7, and on my machine I have both .NET version 7 and 8, but this particular application has been developed in version 7. Now what I need to do is I want to switch to this particular project's version, that is .NET 7. So how will I do that? In order to achieve that, as I already explained, I need to introduce a global.json file. And how we can do that? There's a command to do that. So let me switch to that command. So the first step being you have to run this .NET new global.json command, which will basically add a global.json file to your project. Hit enter, and I should see that file being added over here. Yeah. Now, if you provide a keen observation here, it is basically a JSON which tells what is the SDK. Okay, for this particular SDK, software development kit, what is the version being used? Okay, as I already said, by default it uses the latest version, which is 8.0. Okay, as I already shown you people, if I run .NET list of SDKs, you would see 8.0 is the latest, but I also have a 7.0 also. Now I have to make a switch from 8.0 to 7.0. So what I need to do is basically over here under SDK section in the JSON, and inside that the version attribute I need to change from 8.0.100 to 7.0.403. So let me do that change quickly. Okay, guys, so what I have done is in the global.json file, now I am instructing, okay, the compiler basically. Okay, so the moment it identifies or encounters a global.json file or the runtime, the .NET command basically, okay, whenever this .NET command encounters a global.json file from its working directory, okay, it should make use of the version 7.0.403 for all the subsequent .NET commands. Okay, so that's what It says the SDK commands, including the .NET new .NET run. The .NET CLI must choose an SDK version for every .NET command. Okay, it uses the latest SDK installed on the machine by default, even if the project targets an earlier version of the .NET runtime. Interesting part being, even if your CS project file over here, okay, okay, even if it points to the target framework attribute points to .NET 7.0, it doesn't make use of the .NET framework 7.0, guys. Okay, you should explicitly specify that using the global.json file, then only it will pick the desired framework version. Okay guys, always remember this point. Okay, just by specifying target framework over here is not sufficient. Okay, the version which needs to be picked also specified using this global.json file. Okay, so that's what I was saying. It uses the latest SDK installed on the machine by default, even if you specify into the target. Okay, and then the latest version of the .NET SDK is a preview version. Okay, even if it is a preview version, it will use the latest version itself. Okay, so that is the scenario, or that is the requirements what we need to follow. We have to add this global.json file. Okay, so as I had already explained, on rare occasions, you may need to use an earlier version of the SDK. You specify that version in our global.json file. Okay. The use latest policy means you only use global.json to specify .NET SDK version earlier than the latest installed version. So usage of this global.json file basically specifies what kind of version you want to use. Okay, global.json can be placed anywhere in the file hierarchy. Always remember this. Okay, this file can be kept inside. You can create one more folder. You can keep it over there. You can keep it one folder level up in this hierarchy. It's up to you. Okay, so it can be placed anywhere in the file hierarchy. The CLI searches upward from the project directory. Okay, the CLI, basically the command line interface, which is called .NET. This .NET command basically searches for that file. Okay, upward from the project directory for the first global.json it finds. Okay, you control which projects a given global.json file applies to by its place in the file system. Okay, so for my project I wanted it to use the 7.0 version, that's why I have kept it in the project folder location itself directly. Okay, the .NET CLI searches for a global.json file iteratively, navigating the path upward from the current working directory. So it always goes upward. So if this is the folder, first it checks over here, then it will go to the one level up in your folder hierarchy. Okay, the first global.json file found specifies the version used. If that SDK version is installed, okay, that is also one requirement. If that SDK is installed, for example, in my case 7.0 is installed, then it will make use of 7.0 version. Okay, if the SDK specified in the global.json file isn't found, the .NET CLI uses matching rules to select a compatible SDK or fails if none is found. Okay, always remember this. Okay, so that's all about this global.json file. Now I will move on. So once you specify the version in global.json file, there is one more change required. Okay, so in this case it is .NET 7.0. Okay, if you had created the same project with earlier versions of the .NET like 6.0, then you have to make one change here also. Now I want to point this particular project to .NET 7.0. That's why I specified it over here as net 7.0. Okay, but if you are pointing to some other versions like 6.0, then the same 6.0 change needs to be done in this tab. Okay, in this tag basically, otherwise it won't work. Okay, do remember this point, very important. Okay, so let's save it. Okay, so my global.json file is in place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to issue the .NET build. Okay, but before that I want to verify. So what I need to do is I have to reload my project. So let me do that quickly, guys. So I basically reloaded my Visual Studio. Okay, so after that what I did is I just run the .NET hyphen hyphen version command. Okay, so if you see this command prompt, what is the latest version installed on my machine? 8.0. But the moment I introduced Yeah, this global.json file and reloaded my project. Can you see the difference, guys? The .NET version command is returning 7.0 now. That means now my .NET CLI command is going to make use of version 7.0 for all subsequent actions you are going to perform using this .NET command. Okay, that is the power of global.json file. So if you have a requirement, basically if you have n number of versions or frameworks being installed on your machine, and you have n number of projects which are pointing to various versions of the .NET, in such cases you are not required to run them. Okay, you are not required to uninstall and install specific version of the .NET framework and run them. Okay, simply introduce a global.json file in the project hierarchy, and this global.json file will be read by this CLI utility command called .NET, or I would say the .NET command, and it will take care of running it against the right version, okay, which you want to target. Okay, so that is the very nice feature of this particular feature over here. That's called the concept of global.json. Just put it into the folder structure or the project file or the project folder which you want to point to a specific version, and rest the care will be taken by the CLI commands. Okay, so if you see, if I do .NET hyphen hyphen version, now I'm pointing to 7.0.403 which I specified over here. Now I will perform a .NET build, so it will do this build using the 7.0 framework basically. So if I do .NET build, the build will happen against the version 7.0. So the build is successful. So if I want to run this application, I have to simply issue a command .NET run. That's it. Okay, that will run my application. Okay, so that's what I wanted to explain in this particular session or in this video, how to switch between various versions when you are running your application on .NET framework. Okay, very simple concept. They have made it very, very easy compared to other frameworks. Okay, just introduce this global.json file into your project folder. Okay, and rest the CLI commands will take care. Okay, this way it is very easy to handle your multiple software projects which have been developed in various other versions. Okay, and when you want to debug or run them, it's a very easier and it's a very handy approach. Okay, so the utility command or the CLI itself will take care. It will simply check for your global.json file, locate the version, and if that version is available, simply run that application or build that application against that framework. Okay, so that's what I wanted to explain in my today's session. Thank you for listening, guys, and yeah, have a nice day. So that's it from my side.